Go away. There we go.
The Cardano Aura podcast. Talented people in the ecosystem have trouble promoting their website, apps, and projects that bring value to the Cardano's ecosystem. I create a live podcast that promotes long-form discussions where people can demo their projects and proposal to a wider audience. Okay, so he does he does promoting for others. He just finds what is interesting, gets people on, you share what other people do, and I guess that's good. I actually have seen him a few times, and maybe even subscribed, but I don't know.
Disclaimer.
There's this is the problem where you don't know the person, and you don't know what he. I guess it's in a long term it's a good thing, because the more people share the information, the better. But everybody has to dig deeper here and what he does, and so feel him, how does he affect the people he onboards, and or how he talks, and what his own goals are. So there are two sides of it. The overall idea is good. We just need to share information and everything what is positive and hopeful, and if somebody builds something that it brings value, the more we share it, the better.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so throughout this FUND2, podcasts have basically, been quite, been criticized a bunch. And I think rightfully so, because in a way, there has to be a balance between self-promotion, right, which a lot of, say, these podcasts do, which is oh, hey, stake to my pool, and then having a sort of, without having a disclaimer of actually I am, I'm selling something kind of thing. You know what I mean? If you're to establish yourself as an environment to convey information, you have to establish what the you have to disclaim a bunch of what your biases are, right? So for example, as we just talked about earlier, if we start to break down things, one will need a lot more time, but aside from that, we're introducing, the idea behind cast is not to be, to have bias and introduce that. Actually, that's one thing that I've been quite keen on, in figuring out. So I feel like the whole podcast critique is valid, and is an ongoing problem, which I think
although I think when you think about Cardano here, when a person comes in, maybe he has some experience already. The first bump, you don't want to ongoingly always fund him, but the first bump always is could be the thing he actually needs and brings value, because the equipment and stuff to get right, and maybe he has own work and beside, and then he can balance the actual work and quality of that thing. And when he really, I'm speaking for myself, but when you do really get a value and people put the responsibility, when people give you money, then you feel more responsible, and then you put more value into it. And when you get the results out and you get more attention from this result, then you know what is your actually what is expected from you, and then you also get the first audience, and you can start building from your own there, and you don't need more funding. So it's hard to access.
I feel like what you just said is really important, because from my experience of having had a look at some of these podcast proposals, is they do not actually outline here's how I'm going to use this initial money, and then I'm going to become self-sustaining after that. As you said, because so far, even with TCE, the Cardano Effect podcast, this was part of the criticism, where it's are you going to keep coming back for money, as opposed to, you know, creating, putting yourself in a position where you're actually continually, you know, creating value and you're self-sustaining, right? That makes a lot of sense. So big picture here, being a place where, you know, talented folks in the ecosystem are able to actually communicate the value that they're creating is important, but how it's done, right, is important.
Mm-hmm.
So number 4,